This week on DWF News. This week on the DWF News, we're going to be talking about Venezuela and what's going on. And from a World Federalist perspective, what would a World Federation do about the current issue happening in Venezuela, where now we're seeing basically dueling governments. One government supported by President Maduro, Nicolas Maduro, the elected president in 2014, basically versus the leader of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido, who has basically secured power through constitutional law with support of the assembly. So basically, we're going to get right into it and try to break this down and help you understand what's really going on, because I know it's a lot of talk going on out there right now. And I think it's important that we basically find our way through all of the noise and figure out what's really going on and how we can really help the people of Venezuela. This week on DWF News. So now that we went through a few things, we basically broke things down. Let's go right into our segment and you can get a full analysis of what's going on. And then, like usual, I'll close it up with my conclusion and let you know what the Venezuelan government instability means from a World Federalist perspective. So a lot of the things that you see going on with Venezuela really goes back to the 1970s and 80s, when a young leader in the military, commander, basically decided to organize a revolution against the government, which he saw as basically not helping those people in the rural areas of Venezuela. And they also felt as if the military, not the military, they felt as if the government, people running the government, which is the Democratic Alliance Party at the time, was basically not supporting the everyday person. This would lead them more to a socialist kind of idea, where they believe that neoliberals at that time in the 80s, so let's think about Reagan, Margaret Thatcher in the UK, were basically pushing their political power all over Latin America at that time. We had problems with Latin America connected to Russia during the Cold War. So you talk about Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and many other leaders in that area at the time. America and the Western powers in general were basically supporting a lot of right-wing dictatorship type of governments. You could look at Chile, and their leader at the time, he was extremely Pinochet. He was extremely right-wing. It was a dictatorship. Human rights were abused, and basically people wanted to overthrow him as well. And at that time, also in Brazil, the U.S. was supporting a dictatorship there. And so a lot of people in South America, Latin America, they began to dislike America and our foreign policy towards them. And honestly, it goes back to the 1800s when you really think about it. Panama Canal, things like that, where we were pushing our powers in through the country. And if you really want to get really political, it really goes back to like 1600s with Mexico and the U.S. and what was going on with the American Revolution. The United States has a history of using other countries to push revolution, even in our own country against the UK. But then sometimes when corporate power gets involved in individual wealth, we tend to shift the balance of power, and we usually get behind the person who wants to extract wealth from the country and resources. This was seen with Dole fruits in the Pacific Islands. in American Fruit Corporation, I believe. I think that's like Del Monte today. And I mean, a lot of Latin Americans didn't forget these things, though. It's still on the top of their mind, and we have to really decide, you know, what that history means to us as Western society. Places like the United States, the UK, and Europe, what we did to Africa, what we did to Latin America, what we did to Asia, and a lot of the indigenous peoples. We're paying for that right now. So it's difficult to shift the trends of the last like 300 years and try to make up for all that in a couple of decades. Whatever we choose to do as a Western society has to be real. It has to be rooted in trust, meaning the people in Latin America, they have to believe that we're serious about what we're doing. And it's not something that it's just a trendy thing. Or it's just something that we're doing because we don't like the president or leader at the time. We did this with Bush, and now we're doing it with Trump. And it makes people think from other countries, foreigners, other countries, other leaders believe that you can't trust America, you can't trust the Western world in the long term, and this hurts our fight for World Federalism, and it hurts our fight for a World Federation. So we have to go straight at these type of issues and talk about them, and that's why I'm talking about it today. That's why I'm mentioning this, and this is why I'm bringing it up. So let's dive a little bit deeper to understanding basically the whole history, specifically Venezuela, and why are we at this point right now.
This week on DWF News.
So, from a World Federalist perspective, when you have an issue like what we're seeing in Venezuela, when there's so much political unrest, continuing protest against the government, and then after that, government violence. When you question elections, when you don't know who truly is the leader, when the executive and the legislature are butting heads, what should happen? Us at the Democratic World Federalists believe one thing. That is the responsibility of the United Nations and our global community to come together and support the people over dictators, over coups, and over manipulation. Why? Because at the end of the day, it is the Venezuelan people's government. It is their country. It is not the country of Maduro. It is not the country of the military, and it is not the country of Juan Guaido. It is not the country of the United States. It is those people who built that country and who lived in it all their lives, their ancestors and their descendants. And therefore, it is our duty to protect their liberty and their right to have the government they wish. That is why I believe it is important that the U.S. and other governments around the world, through the United Nations, not alone, go and support new elections in Venezuela. That we demand Maduro allow new elections that we will oversee. Therefore, if he wins the new election, he will be the clear leader. And it will give back power to the National Assembly. We should question what the United States government is doing when it comes to their excursion into other countries and getting involved in other people's politics. We complained when Russia got involved in our politics, which I would say is kind of questionable. Why? Russia did get involved in our elections. Let's be clear about that. Yes, that is true. There was a Russiagate. Now, the question to how much Trump knew what was going on, and it wasn't really his stupidity and his ego, is totally questionable. And that's what a law system does, is bring questionable facts with true facts and what's really going on and come to what? Truth. That's what we want. Truth, reality. We want to come to a conclusion. We want to figure out the facts. And that's what we ought to do with Venezuela. We ought to be figuring out the facts. What do the people of Venezuela want? And I believe there's been enough fighting on both sides, the pros for the Maduro government and the anti-people against the Maduro government, that now it is time to have an election and a review to see what is true, because people are questioning if Maduro is a true leader and he didn't use force and coercion to win an election. That's important. That's what we're complaining about in the United States. So we can't just push other people aside because, well, we're socialists or we're leftists, and that government claims they're not socialists, first of all, and they aren't democratic. Let's be real. Let's stop lying to ourselves. The United States has some points. Maduro has some points too. But first of all, we shouldn't be looking to Maduro. We shouldn't be looking to the United States to get our view on what's going on. We should be getting our view from the people every day who was on the streets. We should be polling them and asking them what is their view about what's going on. That's the problem. So I would suggest the Western countries and the countries who are against what's going, the Western democracies like Russia, China, I would suggest that they work with the United States through the United Nations and clearly say we do not support Juan Guaido and we do not support Maduro. Only thing we want is the facts. We support the people of Venezuela first. We support their decision of what kind of country they want, what kind of economical system they want, where do they want their resources to go. Because, hey, that's a good question. Should they be able to sell it on a free market to corporations and make money for themselves? Of course, that's their choice. But should one individual who's very wealthy in Venezuela with a lot of political power get to control that deal and make all the money from it? No. Should the Exxon Mobil go over there and be negotiating it? No. The people of Venezuela should. And they should choose the leader that they believe who will do the right things. There's nothing wrong that Venezuela wants a little bit of more capitalism. They want a little bit more economic stability. But it doesn't mean socialism doesn't work. And it doesn't mean that capitalism is the greatest thing of all time. What it really means is that people want options. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people on the left and the right, a lot of political pundits use Venezuela as their tool to make their argument. Like I said, I see this from progressives. I see this from neocons. I'm seeing this from alt-right. I'm seeing this from everybody. It's not your country. Who cares if you don't like how the United States does things? It ain't your country. It's the Venezuelan people's country. Everything you're saying is your opinion. They live that stuff. Wake up in your mind and realize that. We are World Federalists. Now, what does that mean? That means we believe in a federal government. Now, what does that mean? That means we believe in a government with power to support the power of regional smaller governments. Just like in the United States. The federal government ought to be supporting the liberty and freedoms of people right here in California. Right? So us at the United Nations and us around the world ought to be supporting the regional power and the regional freedom of those in Venezuela. And us at the Democratic World Federalists will continue to stand for that. We will continue to dive into the dirty and murky waters and all this noise, honestly. That is not about the people. It is about me making an argument and getting attention. I can't stand that stuff. That's careerist. That's political bullshit. We're better than that. So, at the end of the day, the only conclusion we can come to is that the Venezuelan people deserve a new election. They deserve an election that's reviewed and made sure that it is true. But it is not done specifically through another nation like the United States, Russia, or China, who side with specific people because of geopolitical agreements and economic deals that they made. That's not how the world works. And the world won't improve like that. It's about everyday people who live this stuff. So, let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think we ought to do. Should the UN monitor the elections? Should the UN say, hey, US, China, Russia, sit on the sidelines. We will monitor these elections. And then if we can't figure it out after that, then there you go. Try to figure it out now. Because we tried to do the right thing, but the leader of that country won't allow the right thing to be done. That's what I want to see. I want to see you give Maduro a chance. Give him a chance to do the right thing. Don't just go over there and take over a country, send our military. That's not our right as Americans to do that to people. That's not our right as the Western world. We've been doing that for the last 400 years. And where does that got us? For a little time, it was great. But then all of the slavery and all of the raping and stealing from other people's countries have come back to bite us. And now we're dealing with ISIS. Do we want something like that on the border of the United States? No, we don't want that. So let's wake up. Let's get smarter about this stuff. I'd like to thank you again for watching the Democratic World Federalists, to watching the DWF News. I will always sit here and stand for what is true. And I will always argue for the people, no matter where you stand, over the corrupt governments and officials who only look out for themselves. And that goes both ways, left and right. I'm for truth. I'm not for sides. And the Democratic World Federalists is the same way. When we see disenfranchisement and we see abuse and we see corruption, we call that out. We don't take sides. The only side we take is truth and fact. Thank you very much, and you enjoy your week. This has been another segment with the DWF News. Good evening.